helps us, right? Again, we always study every body system, thinking of it as linking it with your cardiovascular, right? So this is your superior, inferior. So this is your atrium, ventricle, and so this is the left, this is the right. The aorta is pumping oxygen rich. So the aorta is pumping oxygen rich but nutrient poor blood. So this is the aorta, and so then one of the branches will be your gastric, your mesenteric artery. It's going to your digestive system. So to the stomach, this is your gastric artery, right? And then this is your mesenteric artery going to the small intestines. Small intestines. So it breaks into capillaries here. I'm sure you remember now the blood flow, arteries and then capillaries. And the capillaries here in your stomach and in your, not really in the stomach, sorry, not in the stomach. We need to make this correct. So not the stomach, it's mainly the small intestines. The only thing you absorb in the stomach is alcohol. So there's your capillaries, you have your nutrients in your small intestine. This is where you eat, right? To break it down, you have your glucose, right? All your nutrients, we're going to write nutrients. I'm sure you understand this word. You have your vitamins, you took your vitamins, everything will end up, will enter. So they end up in my small intestine, and that's where I absorb it. The capillaries, these structures right here are my capillaries. They absorb the nutrients, right? And then the capillaries empty into your vein, right? Your inferior vena cava, right? Inferior vena cava. So now this inferior vena cava, which is going to return to the right side of the heart, to the right atrium, this is now carrying oxygen rich plus nutrient rich blood, right? And so it's gonna, oh sorry, this is oxygen poor. Sorry, this is oxygen poor. How did I write rich? This is oxygen poor blood, nutrient poor. So this is oxygen poor, nutrient rich blood going to the right side, and here it will go to your lungs to pick up the oxygen. And now you'll be pumping. Now it will become oxygen rich, nutrient rich blood. You always combine your cardiovascular system. So after this digestive system, I'm going to ask everyone in a little pop quiz or take home worksheet. I'm going to ask you to draw your own, and then write your little essay for me on what's going on with the cardiovascular circulation as the heart pumps is going to go to the GI. You, just like that, go to the GI, pick up your nutrients, then go to the lungs, then go to the kidneys. I'm sorry, it will be after your renal system because I want you to really know everything. So after the renal system, the only thing left for you to study is your reproductive system. You should be very comfortable in trying to figure out in your head what's going on with the blood. We always link everything with the cardiovascular system. Okay? So that's not until after renal system. Expect that activity. You link your respiratory, your cardiovascular with the respiratory, with the digestive and renal system. So here are the organs of the digestive system, right here. And the organs are divided into two major groups, the GI tract or the alimentary canal. So it's really an open tube, open from the mouth all the way down. It's open, except when you get here, it just makes some deep, not detours, but it coils like that, but eventually it's open. Opens all the way to the anus, okay? And to aid, so this is your main GI tract.
And you have accessory organs that help your GI tract. And the accessory organs are your teeth, your tongue, your salivary glands, the liver, gallbladder, and the pancreas. So they help the digestive system, the gastrointestinal tract in accomplishing digestion. Okay? So there's different steps in digestion. So first of all, you put the food in your mouth. That's called ingestion. And as the food enters the body, there will be your GI organs will start secreting. So they will secrete their products. Mainly, you have water, there's acid, there's enzymes. All these, they have a function. We're going to study them, okay? And as they are, so they, see the food lands in there, then your GI tract will secrete. And as they get mixed, you will have, they start moving. So what accomplishes that mixing and propulsion is moving. We're going to talk about that. And of course, that whole process involves digestion. And you should know the two types of digestion, mechanical versus chemical. Mechanical means you're just breaking it down into smaller parts. Like when you cut up steak, it's still steak. Now when you start using chemicals to change the composition, then it doesn't look like steak anymore. That's called chemical digestion. Chemical digestion involves enzymes. Okay? You're breaking chemical bonds is what it is. You break chemical bonds. And then finally, after you release the individual basic building blocks, you absorb it. And there's two routes for absorption. One is through blood and the other one is through lymph. What nutrient has to enter through the lymph? What is it? What nutrient has to enter through it cannot enter directly into blood?
Uh,
Because blood is mainly water.
it's either
Fat.
Fat,
lipids.
they're the lipids
Okay.
of fat. They have to enter through lymph, remember? And they get converted to a water-soluble form, then they join the blood. And of course, the excess you defecate, poop, defecation. So just by looking at this picture, look at this picture, okay? So we eat, right? It says here the nutrients, once you digest it, the nutrients, you absorb your nutrients. Where do the nutrients end, or the chemicals you absorb? They end up in your circulation, right? And this is separate from the digestive system, right? So what ends up in our feces, what we defecate, was never a part of us. Does it make sense? This is extra. This is, these are substances you never absorb. Does it make sense, everybody? Have you heard of the detox diet? You heard of that?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Where they say a diet will help you get rid of the chemicals or toxins in your body. In my opinion, just my opinion, that's impossible, right? It's impossible for the toxins that have entered your blood to deliver them from here back to there. It's impossible. There is, I just can't explain it anatomically and physiologically how a detox diet, the way they explain it, how it's really possible. The only way to detoxify you really is through your PP. That's it. Once it has entered your blood, how can it move from here to here? No, because what is food? No matter how they say it will increase, it's impossible. So it's just, to me, it's just a waste of money. To just make you maybe feel light or feel, you lost weight, but it will never, ever, ever get rid of toxins that enter here. Don't forget that, okay? Okay, so to be able to appreciate or understand digestion, first of all, we need to know What did we eat? What did you have this morning? What did you have
Oatmeal.
this morning?
Popcorn.
Oatmeal?
I had oatmeal with fruit.
Oatmeal. Okay, so oatmeal has what? You had milk there too, right? Did you put sugar?
I put brown sugar.
Oh, sugar. Okay, so you had carbs,
Hmm.
carbohydrates. You should know now the term, or you should be familiar with polysaccharides. Do you remember this term?
Hmm.
Okay, polysaccharides. Okay, which are carbohydrates. You ingested that, right?
And I'm sure there was protein in there. Polypeptides. Remember this term now, polypeptides. And then you had some fat, lipids. Did you drink water? Yes. Did you take your vitamins? Yes. Did you take some meds? Maybe. Did you, what else did you take?
Coffee.
Coffee,
Uh-huh.
etc., etc. Maybe you took in some germs too, we never know. Okay? Some something toxic, we never know.
Right? Some, what do you call them? The unwanted. So we don't want them. So anyway, this one right here, the water, the vitamins, if you look up their chemical composition, they are already in their basic form. You don't need to digest them. There's no need to break the bonds there. So as far as these substances are concerned, we will revisit them when it comes time to absorb them. Okay? Because we don't need to break them down into their basic, basic form. These ones we do. I'm sure if you had your blood drawn right now, you won't see oatmeal in your blood, right? You won't ever see hamburger or pizza or steak in your blood. What you will
Occasionally coffee.
coffee, yes, sometimes. But I'm sure what you will see in your blood is glucose, monosaccharide, right? You will see your amino acids in your blood. I'm sure in your blood you will see the free fatty acids. In other words, in this form, they can enter my body. In this form, they cannot. But I ate it in this form. So that's the job of the digestive system, to convert the food that I ate, they're called macronutrients because they're required in big amounts. These nutrients, in other words, anyway, it's called nutrients. To convert these nutrients into a form that I can absorb. That's the job of the digestive system. So they have to chop, chop, chop into small pieces called mechanical digestion, and then break down the individual bonds. You remember how your polysaccharides look like? Look at some pictures of your polysaccharides. See, they're very long. Oh, that's cancer. Sorry. Carbohydrate, cancer antigens. Well, they're carbohydrates still. Let me just write. So this is how they look like. Do you remember? And this one is even nicer. See, this is how we put them in our mouth, and this is how they look like. So in this form, they cannot enter the body. So the job of the digestive system is to break these chemical bonds and release them individually. So in this individual form, they can enter my cell. As in this form, cannot enter the cell. It will end up in your poop like your fiber, right? Fiber is is excreted, is defecated because you don't have enzymes to break them down. If you had enzymes to break them down, they won't end up in your food. Does it make sense? Okay? So that's what you call chemical digestion. What is the enzyme that breaks down your carbohydrates? There's only one, amylase. So you should memorize this, okay? Amylase. How about your proteins? How do they look like? You remember how they look like? Like this?
Long
There's
chain.
your polypeptide. So in this form, this is how your steak, your chicken, your fish, this is how it looks like. So you have to release the individual amino acids. Okay? And for your proteins, there's many different peptidases or proteases. I'm sorry, proteases. There's many of them. Many proteases. There's only one. Amylase for carbs. There's no other enzyme that breaks down carbs. It's called amylase. For your proteins, there's a lot. We're going to see, read, or study them one by one. Proteases. The general term for them is proteases. How about your lipids? So look at your lipids. They're made up of this mm, fatty acids. So the individual fatty acids you can absorb, but they're bound together. So you have to break them, the individual bonds, to release the free fatty acids. And same as carbs, there's only one enzyme for lipids. It's called lipase. So in the test, if you see this, you know it's for fats. If you see this, it's for carbs. And everything else is a protease. There's many different types of proteins. Okay? But so don't forget, what is it for lipids? It's just only
Lipase.
lipase. For carbs, it's just only amylase.
Amylase.
Everything else digests your proteins. Another term I want you to know, substrate product. So this is the substrate, and this is the enzyme that acts on this substrate to release this product. I remember in the test, I will ask you this in the test just so I know that you understand what is the difference between substrate and product, and I hope you will catch that. I will say, and this, by the way, and I know you know that my tests are from the test bank for Bio 241 and 242. So there's a question there that talks about amylase breaking down glucose to release the individual polysaccharides or the individual. And you just because you see the word glucose and amylase, you mark that true or correct. So pay attention. So you know that the substrate is this one and not that one. Okay? To release the individual what? Same with this one. I think one of the questions uses this one or this one, whatever. Or maybe I'll write amylase an enzyme that breaks down the lipids to release that. And so be sure you know this one. Be sure you know which one is the substrate, which one the enzyme acts on to release that one. Okay? Look at and read the questions very well. In the digestive system, it looks easy, but then students get so careless. They don't do that. Okay?
So in theory, if you could find a way to block amylase,
Yes.
you could actually do a new weight loss type of thing. If you
And
could
maybe
block.
you can even control your diabetes, what do you call this? The diabetes, uh, what do you do? You're being prone to diabetes, maybe, right?
So why isn't
Because
anybody
that's the
doing
only
that?
one. Or that's why they use sugar substitutes, right? Because the sugar substitutes, you digest it, but it releases amino acids, or some of them are not even absorbed. The difference between saccharin and those sweet and low and all of that, they have varying levels of sweetness, and a lot of them their advantage is you don't absorb it. The body doesn't absorb it. You enjoy the sweetness, but your body does not. It's just already sweet in its chemical form, but you don't digest it. You just poop it out. So you enjoyed your food without increasing the sugar in your blood. But then again, they talk about the danger of cancer for some of them, right?
Mhm.
Well, and they say that some of them actually increase weight gain.
Yes, because it all just, the best is really to control, just limit yourself to, the food guideline amount. Okay, so now to be able to study the function or the activity or the physiology of digestion, we have to understand the anatomy. And so we're going to study the different parts of the digestive system. We're going to call it the mouth or the oral cavity. Then the next part you're going to call pharynx, then esophagus, then stomach. So even though they have different names, and by the way, you should know that there's sphincters that mark the boundary from one to the next, right? You understand what a sphincter is? A sphincter is an area of increased muscle tone, right? To mark boundaries from one area to the next. So right here, between the esophagus and the stomach, there's a sphincter there called the cardiac sphincter or the lower esophageal sphincter. And then between the stomach and the duodenum, it's called the pylorus or pyloric sphincter. So sphincters mark boundaries. They're just like the valves. They prevent regurgitation. Now, as far as the digestive system is concerned, it's called regurgitation. They prevent the food from going back up. You want it to keep going down. Okay? So sphincters. Okay, so now let's go back to the anatomy of our digestive system. And here it is. So no matter where you are in the digestive system, they will all share the same four layers. So the first layer is called the mucosa, and then the second layer is submucosa. Then you have the muscle layer, the muscularis layer, and then the last is the serosa. This, and I'm sure you appreciate your histology. This is why histology is the one of the foundation of Bio 240. You need to have a good understanding of your histology. Now you appreciate everything. So the innermost layer is the mucosa. Because it's the one that lines, it is epithelium. You see? You remember your simple columnar epithelium? You remember that? Okay? So that's the mucosa. So I am thinking, I just want to analyze, I want to figure out what is the function of the cells that make up the mucosa. What do you think? Because it's just imagine, this is where the food, right? This is where the food lands. What do you think will the mucosa, what type of cells will the mucosa be made of?
Simple squamous.
No, simple columnar epithelium.
Columnar.
So, but what do you think those columnar epithelial cells do? What do you think?
That's where everything exchanges.
Secretes. It's
That's
epithelium, so it
correct.
secretes some.
Exchanging because they secrete. I'm thinking that the mucosa must be made up of secretory cells. So one more time. The
Wait a minute.
mucosa is made up of epithelium. It's actually simple columnar epithelium. Some of these simple columnar epithelium, I'm assuming their job must be to secrete. Right? What do they secrete? What do you think? I'm thinking they must secrete mucus. Remember the goblet cells? Mucus is so important, don't you think so? Because I'm sure you know that your stomach is very acidic, right? We know that. And then in your small intestine, it's actually the opposite. It's very basic. It's alkaline. Can you imagine if these cells are exposed to extremes of pH right here? They will suffer. So that's why we secrete the mucus that coats them, right? They have a protective function, mucus. What else do you think they secrete? I'm thinking they must also secrete water, right? Which is vital to chemical reactions. I'm thinking they must also secrete enzymes. What do you think? Aren't enzymes necessary for digestion to break down the chemical bonds, right? So they must also secrete the enzymes. There is another remember, how do cells communicate? Either by what are the
Hormones,
two communication systems? Nervous
nervous,
and
endocrine.
endocrine system. Very good. So that's how they talk. Remember, I told you your cells always talk to one another. So look at your GI tract from do you see this picture? From here all the way down here, they all have to communicate with each other. So how do they communicate? Will they communicate by neurotransmitters or hormones? What do you think?
Hormones.
Yes, very good. By hormones, because they're not nerves, right? So some of the secretory cells must also secrete hormones. Do you understand? So if you look at this mucosa, it's made up of many, many cells. And maybe this cell secretes the mucosa, secretes the mucus. Maybe this cell over here secretes enzymes. Maybe this one here secretes the hormones. They all have a job. Okay? Okay? Those cells that secrete hormones for the digestive system, they are called endocrine cells. So if you see this term, what does that mean? It means it's the cells of the digestive system that line the mucosa, right? And their job is to make hormones. That's how they communicate. So let's say the food enters the stomach. There's a hormone in the stomach called gastrin made by the cells of the stomach. And the target organ, happens to be the stomach again to increase the activity. We're going to talk about them one by one. In the small intestine, the enteroendocrine cells of my small intestine secretes hormones, cholecystokinin and secretin. The cholecystokinin goes to the stomach. That's how they talk. So the small intestine will tell the stomach, slow down, I'm so busy. What's the words that it used? It's called hormones. Cholecystokinin. You understand? Okay? Next, I'm thinking that this mucosa must also consist of absorptive cells.
There we go.
Make sense? Right?
It's got to get its nutrients from somewhere.
That's very good. Because as it's moving down, yes, you're digesting. So from the carbs, I know the individual glucose, amino acids, and free fatty acids, they have to be absorbed, right? So which one is going to absorb? Of course, the first one, the mucosa. So the cells, maybe this is the absorptive cell. So the cells that absorb them, you call them absorptive cells. You understand these different cells? Secretory cells, absorptive cells.
Okay, I'm confused. The secretory cells are the enteroendocrine cells?
The
What's the
secretory
difference?
cells.
You said the
This,
hormones for the communication are called
yes,
enteroendocrine cells.
some of the secretory cells are called enteroendocrine cells, and what they secrete are called hormones.
Okay.
Okay. So you understand what's a secretory cell and what's an absorptive cell. You understand
One
why
secretes and one absorbs.
yes, you understand why they make up the mucosa, right? They're the ones that's in contact with the food. Next, the submucosa. Look at the submucosa. The submucosa is connective tissue. And this is where you find the blood vessels and the lymphatics. Isn't that how we absorb it? So after we absorb it, how do you deliver it to the body? Through the blood and the lymphatics. Where are they? In the submucosa. See, very interesting, right? And then look at the third layer is your muscular layer. The muscular is what type of muscle?
Smooth.
Smooth muscle. Smooth muscle. And this smooth muscle is made up of two layers in general, an inner circular and an outer longitudinal layer. What do you think? If the inner circular layer contracts, won't it decrease the diameter and push the food forward, right? And when the longitudinal muscle contracts, it will shorten the distance. That's how the food is able to move. There's two general types of movement, one called peristalsis and the other one called segmentation. So peristalsis is the forward movement of food. That's how it, after you swallow it, it's automatic. It just keeps moving. Why? The smooth muscle contracts. Remember, when you stretch the smooth muscle, it contracts. And segmentation is local. So the purpose of peristalsis moving forward, the purpose of segmentation is to promote contact really between the enzymes and the substrate, right? Like a match.com, you need to have time to meet and get to know your prospective lover. No, what do you call it? Your new friend, right? So, do you understand the difference between the two? This one is just local, right? Promotes churning and contact between the enzyme and the substrate. This one, move it forward. What will tell the muscle to contract? It must be,
Nervous system.
that's very good, the nervous system. Remember excitation, contraction, coupling? So if you look at this picture, there is a myenteric plexus, which is nothing but nerves. This is part of your enteric nervous system. This is what tells the muscles to contract. Do you see this one? This is why people who have a stroke sometimes, they can't, you have to give them maybe liquid diet now because the stomach with the stroke affected the nerves that regulate stomach activity, let's say. So they get constipated, they can't digest, you have to do the digestion for them. You see? It's nerves. So in response to stretching of the stomach wall of the smooth muscle, and why does it stretch when food enters there, right? The mechanoreceptors sense that, right? Going to the brainstem, and it tells this to contract. Autonomic nervous system, right? Okay? Now you understand, right? If people have a stroke, you sometimes have to do you give them, what do you call it, mashed food or liquefied food because I assume that their GI system is not able to contract anymore. It is regulated by your nervous system. And in fact, you have another group of plexuses called submucosal plexus. Do you remember when we were studying your autonomic nervous system? The target organs of the autonomic nervous system, your cardiac muscle, your smooth muscle, adipose tissue, and glands, remember? So, remember, this one secretion must be glands. So you have nerves that also regulate the secretion of your mucosa. They don't just, these functions we're talking about, they secrete enzymes, they secrete this and that. They don't secrete 24/7. They secrete on demand. And which one determines if there's a demand? Your nerves. Okay? And then, finally, you have the serosa, which is the outermost layer, which serves to insulate your digestive system and also to protect the organs of the digestive system. And this serosa, this fold, this connective tissue, I'm sure you've seen that in your cat already. It gathers anteriorly and even posteriorly to form a fatty covering called mesentery or folds, peritoneal folds. So in the stomach, there's an omentum. Look for the stomach, and from the stomach there will be an omentum or an apron of fat that will cover, that serves to cover all of your GI tract inside. See, it insulates it. So you see your belly is always exposed to extremes of temperature. But this omentum serves to insulate your GI organs so they're not traumatized by the extremes of temperature. I see some people, like with my Baba, it's so cold. He says he's used to it. He can wear just regular shirt. I've seen some girls wearing what is called, what is it, tank top. I've seen them wearing something and maybe exposing their bellies, even if it's very cold. Just think about your organs inside. That's the purpose of this one. Okay? So they have terms. When you say greater omentum, it's right here. It's the apron that's covering it. And then the 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 intestines, look for the fold. When you pull the intestines, isn't there like a film that anchors the intestine to the back wall? That's what you call mesentery for the intestines. If it's the connective tissue that anchors the large intestine or the colon to the back wall, it's called mesocolon. These are folds of the serosa. Okay? And this mesentery has lots of blood supply and lymphatic. That's why they're very good for protection, they're very good for immune function, but they're also very good for spreading cancer in case you have cancer. That's how they are able to spread to the rest of the body. Be sure to identify these different folds. Okay? Do you have any questions so far? We're just going to study all the way to the stomach, and then after that we stop. Do you need a break? Break for 5 minutes? Okay? Then we start putting the food